All right, welcome to our session on building an internal enterprise education streaming solution. My name is Chris Knowlton. I'll be your moderator today. We have a lot of activity, a lot of things to go through here. And what I'll do is start off with some introductions. I'll actually let the panel introduce themselves, and we'll have some slides later, and I'll ask a bunch of questions, and we'll see where we go. And then what we'd like to do is make this an interactive session as well. So if you have questions as we're going, please feel free to raise your hand. Someone will either bring you a mic or I'll repeat the question as needed. And we'll see how far we get and what ground we can cover. So let's start with our panelists. I'll start here at this end and we'll go across and let folks introduce themselves real quickly so you know who they are and where they're from and go from there.
I'm Eric Hards. I am manager of our digital media and visual communications for our space systems division at Lockheed Martin, which is really hard to get on a business card, but that's what I do. I am responsible for our webcasting for our space systems division, but have also been responsible for the enterprise and the architecture of the current webcasting system that we're using from Sonic Foundry's media site.
And my name is Kay Gary. I work at Raytheon in Dallas, Texas. I've been in the webcasting space now for about 15 years within the enterprise, and I facilitate and manage our video library there, and I help with the customer service end and the user GUI interface.
I'm Andy Howard, and I'm the managing director of a consulting company cleverly called Howard & Associates. And I help companies implement video communications, so video streaming and video conferencing, and oftentimes the combination of both of those. I've been fortunate enough to work with some really progressive clients like Deloitte Consulting, Aetna, Anthem, Pella Windows, NYU. So typically from a streaming perspective, the implementations I help the customers with are for large-scale webcasting type applications.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Schwartz. I'm a digital video manager for the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy. I've been in corporate video now for about 10 years. Previously, I was at Celebrity Cruises. I was in charge of their IP TV delivery systems on board cruise ships. And now I work for USC. Basically, my department straddles two responsibilities equally. One is online learning and every kind of streaming that involves with the online learning space. And then another is video production space, where basically we have to do live event, seminar, web capture, as well as making promotional videos and marketing campaigns to help the USC brand through digital video.
Great, thank you very much. All right, well, what I'm going to do first is actually ask each of these folks to tell us a little bit about some of the major scenarios that they work with, and then we'll dive into one or two of those and get into them at a more architectural level so you get a better sense of how they built those solutions out. So we have effectively two representatives from enterprises, one from education, and Andy, who sits in the middle and sort of helps both with his consulting practice. So we have some broad experience here to look at and some different architectures that we can look at, some that are similar and some that are going to be quite different. So I think what we'll start with, then, Eric, we'll start with you. Describe a couple of scenarios. If you want, I can bring up the first slide.
Yeah, that'd be good. That
Okay.
way I can at least stay on target.
Yeah, hang on. So start there. That's you, and go to this slide.
So I won't bore you by reading all of this, but and these are probably very similar to any of you who are doing any kind of live webcasting work or on-demand work within a corporation. We cover the gamut. We do everything from large executive level webcasting with multi-camera, switching, audio control, multiple microphones, along with full AV in the room, so there's speakers and projectors and so on. We also cover what we call some hybrid type events, where we might have an audio telecon with shared slides in addition to a VTC, and wrapping that all up into a single webcast, usually because the audience is much larger than, say, a VTC audience or even an audio telecon audience, and we'll combine those and bring in all the sources directly into our studio, and then webcast those out to a much larger audience, and they're able to see and hear those presenters. And then we do the typical educational type training events with a single camera and a single presenter in that environment. And most of the work that I do now is for our space systems, but I've also done our webcasting for our CEO for Lockheed Martin, and that takes place in a very similar environment. It's an auditorium with several cameras and streaming. The AV is handled by the local folks, and I cover the webcasting side. There's actually a slide after this that might help a little bit. The wall, is it the wall slide that's next?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just real quickly wanted to bring this concept up because I have been on both sides of the wall, and I call it the wall because it makes it very easy and clear for me to describe where my work lies. So I try and separate the production side, which is everything that is this side of the Ethernet connector on the wall, versus everything that's on the other side of the wall, which is the IT side. So I have been on both sides, but that's how I kind of like to talk about where the responsibilities lies within our corporation. I'm currently on the production side of the wall mostly, whereas previously I was on the IT side of the wall.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Okay, let's go and talk a little bit about what you do.
Very similar to Eric, we have divided our webcast into the 5 spaces that he kind of described. When I first started this 15 years ago, our biggest thing was the large CEO webcast, where he would stand in front of a group of people in an auditorium, and you had to bring in a production team and an audio mixer, and you had to be prepared for him to walk around the room, and you had lighting and effects to do, and you've got a large online audience. And it really tasked our internal network in order to do that, but we struggled through that. And that was the biggest draws that we had. But now we see that it's kind of flipped over, and the user-generated content is becoming king within our enterprise. We still have the large CEO events quarterly. They don't draw nearly as many people as they used to for live. Most of the people choose to view that on demand. And we have gotten in a standardized practice, this is a best practice for you, of chopping up the larger videos. I was just reading in the streaming media where a study said that users usually hang on the stickiness of their content was somewhere between 4 and 6 minutes, which really isn't a lot of time to hook your leadership. So we have divided our content up into chapters, and our tool allows us to do that very easily, which is really great. But the user-generated content is what's coming through mostly. In our enterprise, we're doing about 300 events a year. That's a lot of material to consume. And then the user-generated stuff is about triple that amount, as the graph there on the left will show you. So that's a lot of content going out there, pushing to people and trying to view it. So that's kind of our scenario. Do you want to go into the next one?
No, let's save go into the detail part after we kind of
Okay,
do the high level
perfect.
with everyone. So we'll jump next to Andy.
All right.
Yeah, so in terms of the applications that I typically am working on, it's very similar. The CEO broadcast, town hall, whatever you want to call it, is really the driving application because it's really the most challenging thing for an organization to deliver effectively.
And it's one you're not allowed to fail on.
Exactly. Well, the good thing is it gets budgeted. It gets a lot of attention, and things tend to happen. The bad thing is if things go wrong, everybody knows it went wrong, and you're the one that needs to fix it. So that's actually good for me because that's actually resulted in some clients coming to find me in the past. But one of the things that is a big trend, I think, in the industry right now is the fact that people have, a lot of large organizations have been doing these broadcasts for many years. For example, Aetna started doing them in 1999. They had a homegrown Windows media solution, and really the driving factor that they needed to change that was they had to move to Windows Server 2012, and it no longer supported multicast. Additionally, there was a lot of, they have a lot of virtual desktops, which are very challenging to work with video. Windows Media, again, had a solution for that, but there really hasn't been a new solution that's come along to really solve that problem. There's a variety of vendors that are working on solutions for that. Another trend I see is people kind of still distributing content over satellite networks that now want to bring that onto their IP network. I've seen a couple clients do that, and certainly being able to stream to mobile devices is a huge thing that's really, even though the iPad's been around for, 5 years now, and people have been able to stream content on the internet very effectively, a lot of organizations still don't have that capability, in big part because it's Windows Media, which doesn't play well on a tablet. So the trend is moving towards H.264 for the video delivery, in which case you can then hit all the devices.
All right, and Jonathan.
So I guess I'm a little different than my colleagues up here because we are not as concerned with trying to reach the enterprise during, through a closed circuit solution. Because we're a university, we have Internet 2 and high bandwidth. So pretty much what we're focused on is making sure that the content is available and accessible to whoever wants to watch it. So currently at USC, we kind of use video in the online learning space, which is a whole different animal than what we're talking about up here. We do have a couple lecture capture rooms that use MediaSite for that purpose. But for the most part, we're using it more and more in the marketing, recruitment, promotional video, which is pure production, and also in event capture, which involves web streaming, with or without live web streaming. Of course, we have the mass events. We have commencement once a year. We have a big, 3-camera multi-shoot. We have a TriCaster set up. We're doing, a large stream out through CDN. But pretty much all of our content goes through a typical CDN, and we go out that way. What I think we're seeing, which is challenging for us, is that, we're seeing a need to have streaming and video conferencing integration happen anywhere in the university, regardless of the infrastructure set to do so, regardless if you have a hard room set to do that or whatever. So we're focused on building solutions that can be portable and mobile and kind of go wherever we need to go do that. So a lot of our solutions involve having basically a mobile capture kit. I don't know if that slide is on there. I don't think so. The second, maybe the big diagram one. It's all right. Yeah, so basically, we have a mobile solution capture kit that involves creating, having multi-camera shoot go into basically a software switcher, like a Wirecast or a TriCast, something like that, and basically building the solution to be mobile. And then we depend on basically our CDN to get out to everyone because we're not as concerned. We're looking at maybe multicasting in the future to save bandwidth internally to the server, but for us, with bandwidth not being an issue, we're just trying to focus on the mobility of our solution and be able to do that all wherever we need to do.
Cool. Well, that sounds like that cues us up pretty well to go into a deeper discussion. Let's actually go, since we're on yours and you brought up your slides, let's come back down this way. We'll start with you and go into the next slide, and you can talk a little bit about, you have 2 slides on here of different architectural levels, and Sure. You can talk us through one or both of those.
Okay. I guess we'll start with the larger one.
Larger
actually, that's fine. So this is So this is more typical for the asynchronous users, typical workflow. You just have a camera, you record something asynchronously, you put through Avid or Premiere, take your pick, you mix it down, you upload it to YouTube, Vimeo, pretty standard offline production value. Because we don't have a lot of rooms out there with MediaSite, this is kind of what we do for the lecture event seminar capture that does not need to be web streamed. We put PowerPoints in offline and, pretty basic old school production workflow. The next one is pretty much, I think, what's near to this crowd, which is kind of the live streaming and making everything HD mastering capable, which is what I call. So basically, you have as many cameras as you need on the left-hand side there. You're going through an input capture card device. We're using the Aja IO 4K device. We're using SDI across the board just because it's obviously easier. Throw it into a software switcher. Usually we're using primarily Wirecast on a Mac Mini or a Mac Pro, depending on what we need. For large events like commencement, we'll rent a TriCaster, but for the most part, we're that. And this way we can feed overflow rooms with iMag using a TV projector. And then, of course, we output to a CDN, which is Ustream. And then if we're happy to live stream as is, Ustream, as you guys know, can push right to YouTube. We can put it right from the channel. But the main thing about the solution, which we're excited about, is we actually use the Wirecast and or TriCast to record to disk. So after the event's over, we have an instant switched master in high def, ProRes, or DNX HD, and then we can instantly edit that and then get a quick edit up there quickly if we need to make lower thirds or branding or wrapping, something more extensive than the live thing offers. And then building on what Kay said earlier, a big thing that we find being educational is that the attention span is not very large. So if we have an hour and a half lecture by an expert who is really good at what he does but not very engaging, we've had trouble trying to get that content out there. So everything we edit, everything we shoot rather, we drill down to a 3-minute highlight reel. And we edit that highlight reel with the key salient points. We put that up right after the event. That also requires some editing, but that way we get everything up there very quickly, and that has increased our viewership by over 400% by getting that highlight reel down to like 3 minutes.
That's pretty impressive. I guess it also speaks to just how we tend to look at things in these sort of bite-sized pieces
Yeah.
now.
And I think that's basically what we do. I mean, like I said,
Okay.
we don't have bandwidth capacities in USC, so going after CDN is fine for us. That works well for us.
Okay, great. All right, Andy, let's talk to the sample scenario you provided.
Yeah, sure. So when I work with my clients, I tend to tell them that, kind of the way that the industry went was the enterprise providers in the space tended to build their entire solution. So you'd have the encoder, the management software, the delivery servers, all tightly wound together. My recommendation now is to break up the different pieces and use best of breed products for each of those pieces. So, the video sources really, like you were saying, can come from anywhere. It's, in a lot of cases, it's video conference rooms. It can be a single camera shoot. It can be a 3-camera shoot. A lot of people are moving now. They've got Skype for Business implementations. They want to use that as an input into their streaming solution. So really, from the video source perspective, that can be from anywhere. And the way that we usually architect it is to bring that content from wherever it's generated back to a central production facility where it can then be produced, encoded, and then distributed out onto the network. So, for example, in Aetna's case, they would have, very similar to Eric's environment, they had the high-end productions. So, for example, if the CEO went into an auditorium and gave the town hall meeting, they would have a 3-camera shoot. That would go into their high-end production facility, which is like $1 million facility that they have there. But then it would go into encoders and be managed through the management system and distributed out onto the network via multicast. If they were going to do a smaller event, for example, just a departmental meeting, a lot of cases they would book a video conference room. They would do a video conference from one location back to the smaller production studio that they had, where they had a TriCaster. They would produce that, but they could do some pretty nifty things with that. Back into the encoders, same exact distribution piece going outbound. And then, in terms of the management software, that needs to be able to manage all the different pieces of it, but most importantly, be able to deliver the content on the network. And then from the delivery perspective, as the industry moves more towards adaptive bitrate streaming, it's all HTTP. My typical recommendation is to just use standard caches, because then they're transparently deployed. They can work with any solution, and then that allows you to, as new technology comes out, new things are available, you can replace any of the different pieces along the way, rather than having to do a forklift change.
And when you're using those transparent caches, does that also give you the added benefit of offloading a lot of your other web traffic on those same caches, or do you separate into a separate video cache?
In many cases, it does. In a lot of cases, they only wanted to do it for video.
It's dedicated, so they have, okay.
Yeah. And in some cases, that's just because otherwise they'd have to get a whole other group involved
Right.
In the solution. In fact, some of the providers, like Riverbed, for example, if a customer goes to Riverbed and says, I just need caching capabilities, then they say, well, but there's all this other stuff you can do. Right. And then the person that wants just the caching is like, no, let's not. We just want the caching piece of it.
Okay.
So sometimes it can complicate it a little bit, but in general, it's very, very mature and very straightforward.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, and Eric, we'll go on to yours.
You skipping
sorry,
me, Chris?
Sorry, no, I'm skipping Kay.
Thank you.
Kay, we'll go on to
Although
yours.
it may be very similar. So again, at the front, this is what our configuration looks like. You have your input devices, which can be VTC, it can be a camera. I think maybe about 80% of what we do is actually screen scrapes, whether we run a PowerPoint file or whether we share a meeting with the presenter and add audio to it, which is our simplest setup, which is great. So that can go into our encoders. We've used 3 different kinds. We're pretty much settling on our vendor-supplied QCS, Kumu Capture Studio is what we use most of, but we also have used Digital Rapids, and TriCaster. We use them externally to our product to produce those. They go into our origin server, which happens to be down there in Garland, Texas, and then out to our edge servers across the U.S. and even over into Europe. We have some over there. The stream from the origin servers to the edges is all unicast, keeps the bandwidth down, makes the traffic flow higher. We try to keep QoS on them to prioritize the traffic, particularly the video and the larger ones that we do. And then from the edge servers, they go out multicast to the users within that site. And then below that is our little diagram of all the setup for our product. We have an application server. We have load balancers in front of those. We have a hook in for the enterprise into it is the database, simplified sign-on, our security issues there, so it has to hook in and work with all of that. So to me, that looks like a very complicated system, but our IT department makes it really look pretty easy and configurations on it.
Great, thank you. I'll mention that all of these slides are going to be available. I don't know if they've been posted on the site yet, but they will be posted on the site where you go and look in the schedule. You'll be able to see underneath the schedule. You should see a link to these slides eventually, if not
Chris,
already
before
there.
you go on, can I add? I'm sorry, I left off. There was something I wanted to add, again, as a best practice. When we do our video, we try to keep it around 700 kilobits and about 15 frames per second. When we're doing the audio and slides that I had mentioned is the most popular that we do, we knock it down to 215 kilobits and about 7 frames per second.
And how is quality on that?
It's great.
Is it pretty good?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's what we
good.
standardize on.
Yeah.
It gives you a compromise. We bumped it up a little bit and found that the quality didn't really increase for what you were costing in your bandwidth.
Okay.
So that was what works out good for us.
Right, okay, great, thanks. All right, now Eric.
Just curiosity, what size video are you? Is it 720 or?
Yes.
Okay. So I think Kay just described the system we're going to have. We're currently using Sonic Foundry's product, MediaSite, in their enterprise environment. And the system that you see up here is very similar to what we have currently, but I thought it might be better to take a look at where we're going to be headed as far as the product we've recently moved to, which is Kumu. The real difference between the system you see up here and our current system is the number of servers and the edge devices. So we're moving away from multicast. Currently, we stream the majority of our work that's live in multicast because we can. We have a multicast-enabled network, and we've had it for several years, but Microsoft decided not to continue that. So we have gone to what most people are going to, which is either some kind of peer-to-peer, or in our case, we're using the edge devices. Same concept, we're unicast directly out to the edge devices, and then it'll be multicasted there if the network supports the multicast. You'll also see on the diagram here that we have direct connection for single sign-on. We have a transcoding server, which also does text to metadata automatically out of the PowerPoint slides so that it's searchable. And then we currently, although the current system supports mobile devices, it's not an easy thing to do. We can webcast live to multiple devices and multiple desktops, but in order to support the multicast in addition to the H.264, which is needed for the iOS devices, we have to actually have 2 encoders running at the same time during the live event. We can't send a single stream to the server and let it do the transcoding in the current system that we have. So another reason why we're moving to the Kumu, so that we can do that multi-stream capability. All of our mobile devices have been standardized within Lockheed Martin to the iOS. We use iPhone and iPads internally, but we are dabbling in some other devices. It will probably not be Android for security reasons, but we will support some other like Windows devices on the mobile side as well.
So did I understand that you were going to end up doing some transcoding, at least in terms of going to adaptive bitrate on the servers, on the streaming servers?
Yeah, for the on-demand work, actually. So
okay. And then the transcoding server that's hanging off at the left, what happens to the content that goes there and gets transcoded?
it'll go back to the on-demand servers. So it's kind of an automated process. Essentially, if a live event is done and we need it in additional multiple bit rates, or we need to support additional devices on demand,
Got it, okay.
then it'll get, as part of the workflow, automatically transcoded and then put back on the on-demand servers.
Okay, very good. Thank you all for that. All right, well, next question, I guess, then is... Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, please do.
It's actually built into Sonic Foundry's product. So it will actually scrape the text that's on the PowerPoint charts. And the reason that it can do that, a little different than Kumu's environment, Sonic Foundry does high-resolution captures of the screens that are being ingested in the encoder. So they separate out the presentation between video only and slides are separate JPEG files. So it's then able to go in and read the actual text, or not read the text, but OCR, essentially, the text that's on those slides, and then add it to the metadata for searching.
Any other questions before we go on? Okay. All right, so I guess the next question is, given that you're all trying to get to mobile, but realizing that there are some constraints as far as devices and things, are you all trying to get to or reach everyone within your organization, your viewer base, as it were? Or have you made a conscious decision not to get to everyone? And if so, how are you doing it if the answer is yes? And how did you decide not to reach everyone if you're not? So Eric, we'll start with you and go from there.
I was just going to say yes.
Okay, that's easy.
Yeah, so we have had continual requests to do a webcast, entire corporation, anyone can watch, and we've continually had to say no. Not necessarily because the system can't handle it, but because our network is not capable. Even with multicast, we still have pockets within the corporation that are unicast, and the slides that I mentioned, the high-resolution JPEG images, are delivered unicast as well. They're bursts, but if you deliver a slide to 100,000 people, that's a lot of bandwidth. So we've had to curtail the number of connections that we've been able to do on a webcast. Interestingly enough, when we do sometimes get folks that are willing to test what our network is capable of, and understanding that they may have issues with the webcast, even when we try and do a webcast to say one of our business areas that is 30 or 40,000 employees, we're still in the neighborhood of about 3,000 or 4,000 viewers, which is about right for what we're seeing across the corporation. We usually take the invited audience and we divide it in half automatically because people can't connect or they're not online during that portion. We take another 50% and we cut that in half because those people are just not interested. They're not going to watch regardless. So that leaves us roughly about 25% of the invited audience that's capable of or wanting to even watch the webcast. But in addition to that, we were originally a BlackBerry house, so we weren't even going to bother delivering to them. And then we've only recently switched to iOS devices, and the Sonic Foundry system, like I said, is capable of delivering to them, but in a live environment, we have to set up additional encoders. So it's kind of, we're in the mode right now where how important is it, and how much money are you willing to spend? And then we'll try and get to that audience that you want. The new system, the one that we looked at up here, however, the goal of that system was to build in a 50,000 employee capability within the corporation delivering to simultaneous devices. So we should have that capability first quarter.
Hitting any device.
Hitting any, well, not Android. Not going to do Android.
Okay.
It's not going to happen.
All right, thank you. Okay.
So yeah, at Raytheon, it's something as a service provider that we're looking at doing and trying to provide, and we're working close with the mobile apps team on what that's going to look like and the management around it. But it isn't something that we're trying to do right now. It's just not feasible within our environment. The same considerations that Eric just mentioned, what does that kind of bandwidth look like? What kind of cost ramifications are it? And I was listening to a lecture this morning, and he mentioned something I hadn't really considered myself that I found to be very true. The time of day that you webcast might depend on how your audience is trying to consume that on what device. If they're at work, which is what most of our stuff is done, almost all of it is during lunch periods, Tuesday through Thursdays. Monday and Fridays tend to drop off. At that time, people are at their desk. They're in front of their computers. There's no reason for them to pull out their mobile device. And in some of our areas, it won't even work well with the Wi-Fi considerations and things going on. So most of our users are going to be on their desktop. So it's something that, you know, we're looking at. We're trying to move forward to it. We're trying to be prepared for it, but we're not in a hurry.
Question in
we-
the back. Sorry.
I just wanted to add, can we also assume that not every Raytheon employee has a mobile device? Is that correct?
Not a company-provided mobile device.
Do you have a bring your own device?
Not yet.
Okay, so yeah,
Not yet.
same thing within Lockheed. We not everyone has one, and it's a percentage of the overall population.
All right. Question in the back row. Thanks, Justin.
So yeah, Mark Christensen here from Biostream down in Australia. Just wondering how you survey and get to figure out who those people are and what device they're using. That's a big thing for us.
No, you're right. So here at Raytheon, we depend a lot on, again, the mobile app department. They supply us with numbers of how many people have what kind of devices and they're using them. So we have to coordinate in partnership with them.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Internally, we have a pretty good connection with our not only the mobile app development team, but also the folks who are responsible for provisioning of the actual iPhones and the iPads themselves. So we have a good concept of how many are out there. Currently, because we're not doing enough webcasts to those devices, I don't have an actual good number of what my actual viewing population is.
All right. Andy, what are you seeing in the organizations that you're helping?
Yeah, to answer the original question, everybody that I work with wants to be able to reach everybody. I mean, that's part of why they're investing in the solution is to get everybody on the same page, to be able to deliver these communications to all the employees. I think the most challenging piece of it tends to be the very small offices that might have between 1 and 10 people and are still, maybe have a T1, because you obviously don't have a lot of bandwidth going into those offices. But what I try to recommend is don't do the lowest common denominator thing, right? Because you've got a couple offices that only have T1s. Don't stream everything at 300K. I typically say you should have a low and a high multicast. So the high multicast that we did at Aetna was 1.8 megabits per second, 720p, which the network people thought I was out of my mind when I first recommended that. But I said, listen, you've got multicast end to end. You've been doing it for years. It's not even going to touch the network if the network's provisioned perfectly well. And what that also allows you to do is having the 720p is that with the production, with the TriCaster that they use, they can have the video and the content. They can flip back and forth, but it all is just one video stream. So at the end of the day, when you record it, you've got one video file. It's much easier to manage rather than having to have video, synchronized PowerPoint slides and things like that. You can also do desktop sharing. It makes it a lot easier to do that. And then, so from an on-demand perspective, I typically say, you want 3 profiles, a high, mid, and a low. And that, in an enterprise environment, that's usually enough to get the highest quality, because there's not as much variability as there is on the internet. I had one client that was doing like 15 profiles for adaptive bitrate, and that didn't make a lot of sense. And when you go to 3, it's if you're on a LAN, you're going to get the highest bit rate. If you're at maybe one of those remote offices, you're going to get a lower bit rate, but you still have a good experience.
So we're a little different, and I'm probably the weird one here. Our school, our department at USC, I mean, while USC is massive, my department at USC is only somewhere between 300 and 500 people. So, and half of those are probably staff who are not interested in what we're streaming because we're a research institution, right? So our goal is really not to serve the internal population, but to serve the worldwide population of people interested in public policy and public administration. So while our internal usage might be really low, we would have like our more successful webcasts, we have thousands of people outside the enterprise who are trying to access that stuff. So that we're in that little weird mid-range where we don't really need to reach everyone internally, but we do want to reach everyone externally. So for us, that's why a simple CDN is useful for us. Believe it or not, to tell you how much bandwidth we actually have, we have gigabit network jacks at USC. I could stream 4K if I wanted to, probably, or 1080p, even more. But believe it or not, we only stream at 720p 2 MIPS. Because that, we find that most people's browsers, even if we're streaming higher, can't decode more than 720p at the desktop level, or even less at the device level. So we stream at 720p 2 MIPS, and we go through CDN and we set up multiple bitrate profiles during the live broadcast and post live broadcast. So that way people, no matter what device they can accept it. So if they're, Ustream does allow that automatically. So on a mobile phone, take your pick, Android, iOS, whatever, you can stream no problem on a mobile phone. And then when we put to YouTube, obviously YouTube gives you all your profiles there, so you're good to go. So we're pretty easy. However, when we record during the live stream, we'll record at really high res, 1080p. We're actually thinking about going to 4K, so that way we have the full HD master to play around with, to do those highlight reels I talked about earlier, and have fun with the content later and remonetize it, repurpose it, use it for future things, marketing campaigns, promotional videos, that kind of stuff. So we're a little different animal in that respect. We tried doing a 1080p test stream, and we actually got more complaints when we streamed at 1080p than we did 720p, because the browser would detect the internet connection in burst mode, could say, oh, I can handle 1080p stream, and then it would just sputter and downward. So we just okay, no, we're going to max out 720p. So even if your internet provider at home has burst speed, you're not going to get more than the 2 MIPS at 720. So we actually have we have more bandwidth than we can do in the outputs, and the receiving end, that's a problem.
All right. And, I think you've all answered the question that I had next, which what quality level are you shooting for? It sounds like you're all shooting, even though with different bit rates, for about 720p with decent quality.
Yeah, I didn't answer that question. Because now I feel bad. It's like, we're delivering 320.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and that has been driven by our network environment, and a lot of it has to do with just how concerned they are with whether or not it's going to become a problem across our network. Mm-hmm. We've proven with multicast that we can deliver higher sizes and higher bit rates, but a lot of it has to do with the content we're delivering. In general, it's talking heads, and we just haven't had the need to go to a larger video size because of that.
Right.
So it's you kick it back and forth. You've got the folks that say, hey, I can get 720p or 1080p or even 4K delivered to my computer at home or my TV at home. Why can't I get it at work? And I say, yeah, but you're not watching a feature film.
Right.
You're watching a talking head, and you're probably really more interested in listening than you are actually seeing them regardless. So we actually don't have that many people who want that higher resolution, and the network folks are very happy about it.
Okay.
Oh, Chris, probably one thing and also helpful for us is that because we go through a CN, we solve all the problem of where we don't really care when they watch it. So for us, we go straight to the on-demand format. So as soon as we're done, we're on our CN just loops it. Yeah. Or we'll put it on iTunes U so they can actually download something like that. So our solution also entails having the post downloadable and looping features so they can pop in whenever they want. Okay. We're not really care. We don't care when they watch it, just that they watch it at some point.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other comments on quality? All right. So when you think about, and you've touched, I'm going to preface this by saying some of you have already touched on this one as well, but when you think about the best possible ways to distribute your live streams, obviously there's multicast, there's unicast using internal Origin Edge network or caching servers. There's also peer-to-peer. A lot of folks are not happy about putting that on an enterprise network, but there's increasing sort of resurgence of peer-to-peer technologies which are available today to solve the multicast issue now that Microsoft has pretty much gotten out of that business. So I'd like to hear your thoughts of each of you, just even if you've brought it up before, just sort of summarize what your thoughts are on those different forms of delivering in which you think works best given the parameters that you have to work with. Jonathan, let's start with you.
I'll be a little quicker because we're not doing that. Honestly. Like I said, we're all external, so it's a little different for us. However, I can speak a little bit about what we're planning on doing in the future. So USC is a very interesting infrastructure in the sense that the web services, like whenever you go to a USC web page, all that's cached by our central IT division. So one thing we'll be experimenting with come next year for our larger broadcasts is putting an internal server, probably like a Wirecast, RTSP server, or stream server internally, and send that to our, and then have the web page embed that. So therefore, our web page is serving out the embedded stream. So by default, they're caching it for us. So it'll be kind of like a unicast connection from our internal server to our web service division, central USC, and then people will watch it that way. So we're just that's something we're considering, but like I said, I'm quick. We're not really, we're all external, so we're just using the
Right.
CDN for the most part.
Right. Okay. Andy, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so obviously I'm a huge proponent of multicast, especially in very large environments. There's really no other way to support a webcast with 20,000 concurrent viewers on an enterprise network. There are solutions that are coming onto the market to be able to multicast H.264. Ramps, can multicast HLS now. Their media platform and VBrick both do flash multicast. So there are solutions that are out there that are supporting that, and it hasn't been easy. It's still a little bit. It's not as easy as how Microsoft made it, but it's starting to get there. So I wouldn't hesitate, going down that road. In terms of on-demand content, like I said, with HTTP streaming. Utilizing HTTP caches just makes the environment so much easier to manage because you don't have to manage it. A lot of times people used to pre-position content, and they'd spend a lot of time creating all these rules, and with caching it just takes care of itself, so you don't have to worry about it, but it still allows you to have that high quality. And because of the usage patterns for on-demand, it's much less of a challenge. Because one person's watching it now, one person's watching it later, versus that burst of everybody watching a large-scale live event. Now, that being said, I did a project for Keurig, which is the coffee machine company. Mm-hmm. They've grown by acquisition, so they had a lot of different networks scattered throughout the world. They were had 4 or 5 different WAN providers. They couldn't get multicast working on their WAN. But they only had, a few hundred users in each different location. So for that particular client, we said, let's forget about the multicast because it's going to be too challenging to get it going on the WAN. Just do unicast. So they just stream, one stream unicast to the locations, and then once it gets on the LAN, there's enough bandwidth to support the amount of users that they have there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I outlined we're currently pushing unicast out to our edge servers and then multicast from there. We are trying to look for a solution because of the multicast dilemma. We have been talking to Ramp about their solution and looking at that. For mobile devices, we've been looking at the H.264, but again, we're not ready to go very far with the mobile devices yet, but I think that's the way we're looking. HTML5 is going to be a big factor, I think, too, for us in our environment.
Okay.
So yeah,
Great.
currently multicast, Windows multicast, and I'm still somewhat hopeful that they're going to solve some of that, and maybe come out with a different form of multicast. But
When you
we'll
say
see.
they, who do you mean?
Microsoft. I got my fingers crossed. We'll see.
Let's talk afterwards.
Yeah. Or Wowza. Yeah. Or
We
Wowza.
we have multi.
And I'm also interested in what the H.264 multicast is going to be capable of, but.
Right.
We're setting up Kumu in the same environment that you have, which is unicast out to the edge devices and then multicast out to the users, because we do have the multicast network. And I would agree with Andy that I don't think I could. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we start delivering some unicast streams off of Kumu as well, because without multicast, I don't think I could deliver to 50,000 employees at any given time, given the network that I currently have. Mm-hmm. And I was going to say something else, and I forgot what it was.
It'll come back.
Yeah, so that's where we are.
Okay. Well, let's change the look, I guess. Change sort of the perspective a bit, and think about what's happening now, and where you see things going as far as trends, and things that are going to impact how your deployments evolve over the next, year or 2 or 3. So, if each of you could share a couple, 2 or 3 trends, key trends that you're seeing, I think that would be great. I know, Jonathan, I think you actually sent some in. Do you want me to put them on the slide?
No, it's all right, I got it here.
Okay. Why don't we start with you, and we'll
Sure.
talk
So
about those key trends you're seeing.
we're noticing 3 key trends. They're kind of interrelated, but we're noticing first and foremost that, like I said earlier, we need to do streaming and video conferencing anywhere. Even if the room is not set up with a traditional distance learning environment and multi-cameras and a media site or cameras mounted on the wall, whatever, we need to do it anywhere. So we're starting to, Dean's conference room, place across the street, whatever. So we're starting to build solutions that are more mobile, like a mobile cart with a capture card and software-based switcher where we can do. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be able to do a four-camera multi-camera shoot in like a conference room, but we need to be able to stream a video conference anywhere, and the video conferencing, and that can mean Adobe Connect, it can mean Skype, it can mean WebEx, but being able to do that anywhere. Second trend we're seeing is integrating, specifically for education, but integrating the distance learning student into the campus culture environment via streaming. So basically, a distance student, is from anywhere in the world, and there's a very known lecturer coming to talk, and they don't have access to it because they're not an on-the-ground student. So we need to be able to. We're starting to scale up where we can quickly capture those events and seminars and stream them out distance student, or capture asynchronously and get to them quickly. But we're getting the pushback to make sure that distance student has access to all the great seminars and lectures on campus wherever they may be held. And then finally, and I think this is going to be our big pain point moving forward, is we're seeing the big push for synchronicity, where a distant student or a remote viewer can integrate and talk back with the presenter, ask questions, chime in, have a chat line, whatever. So one thing we're going to be doing moving forward is how to pick a more versatile video conferencing solution, obviously probably being a software-based, more likely than not, or a combination of software hardware, and then integrating that into our live event via the web stream through some kind of source. I mean, obviously our solution now can take it as an input, but how do we manage that? Is there someone there managing the chat line? Is there a Skype control center somewhere else? How do we integrate that? But we're getting a big pushback to do synchronicity to make sure that whoever it is, wherever they can chime in.
All right, thanks. Andy?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about networking. Talked a lot about the networking challenges and mobile devices. So those are obviously trends I think we're going to see moving forward. I think one of the things that I tend to see is that while it might start with the executive broadcast, once organizations start doing these live events, then it starts to go down the next level of management. So kind of like that slide that Eric had where there's all these different types of events, that's just going to generate more and more content out there. So it's going to be more and more challenging to manage all that content. So you really need to look at the management software and make sure that it's going to allow you to do what you want to do. I think some of the unique things people are doing with speech to text now is very cool because it allows you to search within the video, not just do a search and the video shows up, but then you can jump right to the point in the video with your search term. So those kind of things of being able to categorize the information, even some of the social features like being able to rank it and things like that, so the good stuff rises to the top is going to be very important.
All right, thanks. Kay?
I can echo that. As you were talking about that, we're very excited about our new implementation of Kumu because it will help us do that, where we can search words spoken in the video. So I think that is going to be a big thing. One of the things I already mentioned that we're seeing is that shorter clips are better, the more you can break them up. Most of our content is user-generated, so our ability to enable employees to create their own content at their desktop and upload it into our system library and create the metadata around it so people can find it is becoming a very big trend within our department, so that people can self-educate themselves is a big deal. Being able to integrate that with the social media that we have internally. We have our own wikis, we have our own blogs, and their ability to embed that video in there and start a conversation around it is another way to socialize that video and attract viewers to it and get them talking about it themselves, so that that's the less marketing that we have to do from the top down. They're doing it themselves. So enabling them to capture that video and put it out there easily is becoming really, really important.
So everything they said, no. Couple of things. If you were at Corey's keynote yesterday with Microsoft, one of the things that he said was that video is just a better way to communicate, and therefore you're going to see its continual growth, which I completely agree with, and I expect to see. I think another trend that you've just solidified for me is that we're going to see more user-generated content internally. That has always been a big battle between legal and HR and our communications folks, and how much we're going to allow employees to generate their own content. And I think that that's actually going to be coming to a head probably next year, at least within Lockheed Martin. And that's going to have to be solved. It's the same problem we have with our cell phones and our phone cameras. When cell phones had cameras, so our security folks said, I'm sorry, you can't bring those on campus. So you can imagine how long that lasted. So now we have iPhones which are capable of capturing 4K video and posting it to YouTube. And so why can't I post that directly to my internal network and actually share some information? I think that's something else that's going to have to get solved within our organization. And then the other big trend that I'm seeing is more external type communications, more of the ad hoc social network, Google Plus, types of connections that they want to be able to make because an event is happening internally, and that is actually very difficult for us to do. Either we have to say, well, we'll use our cell connection because it's external to the network and you have to use your personal device in order to do it, or you have to start poking holes in firewalls, and they don't like that very much. So I think that's another thing that we're going to have to figure out internally as an enterprise is how can we use these devices which people have effectively and also securely, and also start connecting more to the external environment and sharing more of the things that happen within and outside of Lockheed Martin.
All right, thank you very much. Let's talk, I guess, maybe I did this in the wrong order, but that was sort of where you see things heading. I'm actually going to ask you to look back a little bit again now. Just given what you've been doing as far as your deployments and sort of adjusting to the times, what are the biggest, or one or two lessons learned or best practices that you think you can share with this group that might actually help them with their deployments?
Can I add one other part of that question?
Sure.
Did you come from
Was video already being used, and so it was a natural progression of they said, hey, we want to use this more, or did someone have to sell executives on, hey, that should be in video? And then how has that grown within your respective organizations? Does that make sense? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was video already kind of being used, or did someone have to come and sell video?
That's a really interesting question. The way that we started webcasting was we actually set up a computer and we hooked a camera to it and we used Microsoft Windows Media, and wow, we could actually see a video. We showed that to our CIO and he said, can I talk to people this way? And we said, sure, why not? And then his peers saw it and they said, well, I got to have one of those. So it was this kind of internal growth that happened through that process. And at the time, I was working for our IT organization, and we could actually sell it as a product. So we did production and we did webcasting, and essentially it was this internal backwoods growth that happened via webcasting. And it was just kind of natural because communications was via email. We weren't videotaping our executives giving messages unless it was the end of year kind of thing. So there wasn't a lot of communications happening via video. Webcasting actually started that process. Does that answer your question, at least from our perspective?
Yeah, we had a similar experience where video has always been a part of the life. Mostly it was used externally for marketing, and then they found out they could use it internally to market various things. And then suddenly it was an idea of one of the producers there that, hey, maybe we could stream this out live so that we could get our, again, it started with the CEO messaging going out, and then others, tacked onto it and decided they could do it, and we expanded it into the knowledge learning. As a best practice, I would suggest when you get ready to do an event that you create a checklist. I heard this before in one of our sessions, and I'll echo it. It seems very basic, but it's easy to skip a very important step, particularly under a panic or stress situation. If you don't have it written down and you check it off, I don't know how many times, very few. I have very few experience. But I've gone back and something really simple as, starting the encoder before I try to reach it externally with my application will hang me up and I can't figure out what's going on. And you get down to that last minute and then it's just like, oh my gosh, have a checklist. Put a checklist out there. Another good thing I find from my customer's standpoint, most of them are very understanding and a lot of them are pretty tech savvy. If you set their expectations and if you help them stay updated and keep them apprised of what's going on, they'll be more likely to work with you rather than condemn you. which is really hard at the time. Everybody's under stress, but it's really helpful when you go backwards. And if you have established a good relationship with them, then they're less likely to turn around and condemn the technology based on their experience, because you've already set them up and explained to them what's happening, what the hiccups are, the complications coming up. So establish that relationship and set yourself up with a checklist so that you don't forget anything. Two of my ideas.
Yeah, most of the companies, especially the larger companies I've worked for, have been doing it for a while now. They're just trying to do it better now and to reach more people on more devices, just more effectively with better quality. I find small and medium-sized businesses maybe haven't used video as much just because maybe they're not as geographically dispersed, things like that. But even those companies are now starting to understand the value of video, so they have kind of a clean slate that they can start with. And I think the culture of the organization will kind of determine how prevalent it is used. So, you're typically going to see an organization that does a lot of video conferencing is probably also going to do a lot of streaming and vice versa. People don't use a lot of video conferencing, they're probably not going to use the streaming quite as much.
So I'll start with building on that. It's the culture organization. So to answer your question first, we started off with when I came on board, we had a really basic YouTube channel. The videos were all standard def with horrible audio. And then the university said, oh, we're going to make everyone promote one video, upload one video per week. And the school's like, well, we can't do that. So that's how they hired me. And I started off with a standard def YouTube channel and mandate, put up one video per week. That was basically it. And where we grew from that was people realizing slowly, the culture organization, we can really push our brand this way. We can really promote ourselves this way. And I kind of positioned our department in the sense that, hey, look, I understand you have this mandate of one video per week on YouTube, but why are you spending $43,000 outside the university to hire someone to do your promotion video? Let's bring that out in-house. So for us, it was a cost savings mechanism as well. We start off with idea the school wanted to promote themselves with video, but we also wanted to try to save these cost savings. And we've saved the school quite a bit of money by bringing everything in-house. So that's where we started, if that answers your question there. I think lessons learned for us, we learned a couple. First and foremost, and I know this sounds really basic, but like I heard you were saying you broadcast at 360p. I don't think your video quality is as important as your audio. That's one thing we learned. If your audio quality is good, people will handle bad quality or compressed video or a postage size stamp. Really invest in making sure your audio is good on your production end. That's the best advice I can give on the production end. Another thing we learned was that understanding what your organization is going to throw at you. So when I first said, now that we built this promotional video in-house, we have all this equipment, we can now do the things, let's start web streaming internally. Let's start doing live streaming internally, right? They said, okay, great, go to this event, it'll be a one camera shoot, one person talking. Great, so I show up with a really basic device, like, can you have an audience camera, and can you have a PowerPoint feed dump, and can you do this? And you're like, So I think you have to understand what your organization is going to throw at you, so that way you walk in with a solution that can handle everything they might possibly throw at you, and then know when to say, you know what, after you get past this point, you need to have the budget to go beyond that. So basically, we've grown now to the point with our solution that we can handle pretty much anything they'll throw at us until they get to 3 or more cameras or something high profile like commencement, in which case, or like we have, a high profile name like John McCain or Arnold Schwartz come to this, which case, I'm sorry, we're going to run a TriCaster. We're going to go for that extra level. So understand what your organization is going to throw at you. And the other two lessons I think we learned was have analytics at the very get-go, because nothing will convince your organization more that you are valuable if you can show we had engagement and we had people viewing our brand. Because when I can show, hey, look, that web stream we just did, yeah, you spent $3,000 on it, but we reached 4,000 people. They're like, whoa, really? And even like a couple hundred, like, really? A couple hundred? Because remember, we're a policy school, so even a couple hundred in our industry is like, that's huge. So analytics are very helpful. And lastly, building the point that you guys said earlier about trends, we're being bit very hard with the fact that we didn't start with ADA and ADA compliance and transcription from the very beginning. We now have a library of YouTube of 678 videos representing somewhere around 1,000 hours of content. And now I'm getting requests, hey, can we search it? Do this, can we search that? Can a professor find a clip when so-and-so said this and use that in their class? And that's where we're getting bit at now. So now I have a $100,000 proposal on my desk from 3Play, to basically go back and retranscribe all of our videos and make it searchable with a little Java app, kind of like what Temple does. I know Chris in the audience, Temple does that right now for their online learning. And my organization's like, $100,000 to go back and retranscribe? Is our content really that valuable? And then the debate is, well, what's valuable, what's not? So I think that's what, lessons we learned.
Great, thank you. Are there any?
I'd like to just echo the audio thing. Don't skimp on the audio. That's extremely important.
Any other final comments from the panelists? All right, any final questions from the audience? One over here, sir. Go ahead. Oh, microphone.
Hi. So, Arpad Kun, Ustream. First of all, thank you very much. This was awesome insight. For me, that was the greatest panel on this conference.
Oh, thank you.
Perfectly honest. So, seriously, I'm very glad.
Put that on your survey form, please.
Yeah. I'm going to fill out this.
Okay.
So, content delivery is my responsibility and my passion. And I really hate also, I also really hate choppy video and spinning wheel and all those things.
Sure.
And I have spent my last 5 years with this problem, and we at Ustream came up with a solution, with the ECDN, Enterprise CDN solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I invite you to it's a beta test, invite only beta test. We are just before launch, and I would happy to help out, to test, to see, just for free of charge, to look at your opinion. So you look at it, you tell me my opinion about this. I'm very excited about that because I think this is very important. That multicast is a problem. It's going to somewhere which is not maybe forward, and we really want to solve this because for video, as you mentioned, is the future of communications. So. I want to invite you to test
Great.
it and
does that apply to? Does your invitation to beta test your new ECDN? Does that apply to anyone in the room? Should they come see you?
Yeah, please come and see me.
Right,
but
great.
Anyone, please come and see me.
Thank you. All right, timing-wise, we need to wrap it up. I think if you have further questions, our panelists will hang around for a few minutes, come up and see them. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank our panelists for sharing their insights.